Hey everyone, I mentioned that I wanted to do a bit of an opinion piece on the Forza Motorsport news that dropped yesterday, and, well, this is that video. I was also invited to another closed-door session where we got to ask some questions and get a bit more info about the game, so we will talk about that here as well. I really did want to make sure I covered this though, because honestly, the news from this Forza Monthly has made me more excited than just about anything else I've seen yet on the game. I love the more techie physics and handling focus here. You know, we expected shiny graphics and a new campaign, but this is kind of the thing that actually makes the moment-to-moment gameplay feel better. So we're talking today about Motorsport's new AI and tire model. Let's start with the AI, which has actually seemingly been built from the ground up. The big selling factor here is that Motorsport's AI no longer cheats the physics or rubber bands at all. And this is a bigger deal than many of you might realize. The AI is bound to all of the exact same specs and handling and physics that you are as a player. If they do something, it means you can do it too. And that means that they are much more valuable at teaching players how to drive. We'll get back to that, but I do want to now step back and tell you guys how Motorsport 7 worked, just so you have a comparison here of how much better this new system is. And while we're talking about it, I'm going to throw up a visual comparison showing how much faster the new AI is compared to FM7. Trust me, the time difference across a single lap here will blow your mind. Now, obviously, a major factor that controls how the AI drives is the driving line, and in FM7, every line was hand-drawn by a single dev at the studio who was just good at racing, and there were only a total of 3 possible lines the AI could take through any given track. And, you know, this isn't a criticism of that dev, but no matter how good you are, you simply can't guarantee that you found the best line through every track. And different cars are going to be faster by taking different lines. I mean, real professional GT3 or F1 drivers, for example, debate track lines and understand that different track conditions and cars with different grip levels and weight balance and so on are going to need to take different lines through a corner. So already in FM7, the AI was kind of hard-capped in skill by a manually placed one-size-fits-all driving line. But of course, I'm saying all this to happily let you know that the new Motorsport has done things completely different. To start, instead of just 3 lines per track, Motorsport now has 19 racing lines per track that the AI can use to drive based on car type and road condition. So for example, the AI will now account for front-wheel drive versus rear-wheel drive cornering, wet versus dry conditions, and power and grip levels. And all of that has been set with machine learning instead of being just manually drawn by a dev. The AI runs each track 26,000 times in tons of different cars with different tunes and builds and in different conditions to generate those 19 possible lines. And it actually uses the track limits now. So you'll see the AI drive up on curbs or even dip a tire off if it needs to. And this alone gives the AI driving model a massive advantage. And it has major implications for other parts of the game. For example, if you play with the racing line on, it's likely to be a much more accurate guide now, and you can probably trust that it's right most of the time, which admittedly just wasn't the case in FM7 or even FH5. And that's just one part of the AI. The other element is the AI controller itself. Guys, this is gonna blow your mind, but in FM7, the AI couldn't even do partial throttle or braking. It was basically just an on-off toggle, and if they needed to mimic partial throttle, they just feathered the throttle from 0 to 100 really quick. I mean, no wonder they needed cheats to be fast, right? Well, of course, that is no longer the case, and now the AI, over the course of those 26,000 runs, learns exactly when to brake and give throttle and by how much. So the AI drives significantly smoother, faster, and more realistic. All of this means that the AI is going to be so much more engaging to drive against and helpful. because now you can learn from them. If you've got the difficulty cranked up and they're kicking your butt, try to follow their lines and watch their braking points, and they will teach you to be faster. This also has good implications for teaching players how to drive better online, and should make for a much smoother PvP onboarding experience, where drivers that have only played single player aren't just completely caught off guard when they enter their first multiplayer lobby. Now, I had a couple questions about this, because of course AI that can hot lap really fast is one thing, but giving the AI personality and racecraft, like the ability to attack or defend or make mistakes, is a whole nother beast. So I got a great answer to that in the private meeting, but then Leah actually re-asked my question to Chris on the live stream, and he expanded on it further, saying that they don't necessarily program the AI to make mistakes. You know, there isn't like a 3% chance that the AI will spin out on any given corner. But because the AI now drives much more like a human at the limit and reacts to other cars around it better in a race setting, they can just naturally make mistakes, like braking too late, and that might cause them to go wide and dip a tire off the track, which would slow them down or even cause them to spin. So although it doesn't happen often because they programmed the AI to drive clean and fast, there still is that dynamic element to it where you can occasionally see the AI mess up, and it's just because they actually messed up. As for the ability to attack and defend lines, Chris said that the AI system is much more flexible than before, and they can make changes on the fly post-launch to create behaviors like attacking or defending, or even taking a line in a different way. So even though it won't be in at launch, it's possible we'll see these behaviors get added later, and I do personally really hope they get added in. You know, the Drivatar system that kind of mimicked real player behavior was certainly not perfect, but the core idea was really good, and I'd love to see these new, much faster AI get injected with some personality to become, for example, more or less aggressive, or favor different lines, or whatever. And that's pretty much it for the AI talk, but before we talk a bit about wheel handling and tire physics, I do want to point out something here about the AI that could be huge. And it has to do with the performance index, or PI. See, the way these games calculate PI is by actually having the AI drive around a fake simulated test track, and then the game scores the car's PI based on how the AI performed on the track. Smart in theory, but the AI was never that good of a driver. I mean, they couldn't even do partial throttle or trail brake. So this meant PI was never super accurate, and could be essentially exploited by building and driving cars in a way that the AI effectively can't handle well. This has been the primary driver behind what makes a broken meta car a broken meta car. And it's why a lot of meta cars are really hard to drive. It's because the AI can't drive them well either and scores their PI lower than it really should be. Now, all of this is to say that with better AI comes a more accurate PI, because the AI will be able to generate a more realistic and accurate rating for the car. And if this is actually the case, it could be huge for PvP car balance. So again, I think it's needless to say here that this new AI system actually causes a major ripple effect throughout the whole of Forza Motorsport, because it's going to make the single player more engaging, rewarding, and challenging, and give players better practice for PvP racing, and can also make car balance more accurate and make the player racing lines more accurate. So this is big. But now I want to talk about the other major focus of the dev stream, and that is the tire model. This has been bragged about for a while, you know, the 48 times improvement in tire fidelity, which we now know means that they increased the amount of contact points per tire from 1 to 8, and increased the physics polling rate on the tires from 60 Hz to 360 Hz. And again, this is a bigger deal than it might seem. Of course, having 8 points of contact with the road instead of just 1 is a massive leap forward. For example, in FM8, your tire was either on-road or off-road, no in-between. Same goes for curbs or any other change in surface. You were either on something or you weren't. And this caused the tire model to feel really snappy and unpredictable, because you'd feel like you maybe just barely touched a curb, but the suspension would react like you just hit a violent bump. This also meant that tire deformation basically didn't exist. The tire acted as one rigid object, not a soft, dynamic material that could deform around a surface change. Of course, now, though, with the tire being represented by 8 points of contact, it means the tire does actually deform around curbs and surface changes, and you can have part of your tire off track or up on a sausage curb, and the physics will accurately reflect that. On top of that, each point of contact is updating its position 6 times faster, 360 times a second, meaning that on fast surface changes like this, the tire is finding grip much better than it used to, and it's much smoother and predictable. To complement this, the tire heat model has also been improved for motorsport. Many of you will know that tires are at their grippiest when they're hot, but they lose grip if they overheat. And in FM7, this happened really quickly. The grip fall off was super aggressive. So here for the new game, they've smoothed that off a bit and made it more predictable, which means catching a slide will be easier, and knowing when you're at your grip limit will be easier. It also means things like drifting will feel smoother and more predictable. And as a final note here, Chris also mentioned, kind of on the topic of the improvements in handling predictability, that a lot of other things have been touched on as well, like lift-off oversteer, which has been made much more accurate and, as a result, much more drivable. So MR2 fans rejoice. Now, all of this means that cars in motorsport are going to feel a lot grippier and easier to drive than they were in FM7, while also being much more realistic. And that, to me, is just a huge win. This should translate really well to wheel gameplay. Many of you will know that FM7 was not good on a wheel, and from what we saw of Chris driving just a Logitech G920, I noticed so much more confidence in the handling and feedback. And they said they'll talk more about wheel support later, but from what we've seen here today, I've got a lot more faith that motorsport is going to feel good on a wheel. Alright, to wrap us up, I do just want to touch on a couple more info bites that dropped during the meeting and live stream. Mainly that drift and drag specific events will not be in-game at launch. However, they will still have things like drag tires and drift suspension, and you can still set up your own drag or drift lobbies in-game with private meetups. There just won't be a specific drift scoring game mode in at launch, because as they said, they really wanted to focus on nailing circuit racing first. On this note, vintage tire compounds have been confirmed to be returning for classic cars, and of course we will have soft, medium, hard, and wet race tire compounds. And finally, to close us out, here are the other topics we'll be seeing on Forza Monthlies over the coming months. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know how you feel about this. Honestly, this is kind of the first thing that's gotten me excited since the reveal, and that was ages ago. So I hope they keep it up and deliver a really good, fully featured multiplayer. And everyone, I'll see you in the next video.